Okay. All right, so it's 10 o'clock. I'll go ahead and get started here. I'm sure there'll be a few more people coming in. Let's see. Okay, I started the recording. Okay, and here's the map. I'm sure you've seen this in some of the other presentations you've been to already. It's kind of a fun thing to see where everybody is in the group. Let's see, so I will turn on your whiteboard permissions. And if you could look for the star icon and put a little star on the map to show where you're checking in from today. Oh, really, Peru. Am I seeing that right? Let's see, I'm up here in Oregon. Mine doesn't seem to be working. Hang on a sec. There we go. We got Florida and Peru. But this map is so tiny, it's hard to see everything. Oh, there's a few more. I have a small screen, so I have to put on glasses to see this. There we go. So it looks like, what is that? Maybe Texas or Arizona, maybe? Texas. Okay. Peru, Texas, Florida. And then we know someone's in New Zealand. Oh, Debs is in New Zealand. All right. Okay, well, I will go ahead and move forward. Thanks for doing that. Let's see, you got my slides in there. All right, so good morning. My name is Jamie McMillin. I homeschooled my 3 kids for about 15 years. My oldest 2 studied at home all the way through high school, and now they're both honors students at universities. My youngest tried school at various intervals in 3rd grade, 6th grade, and now she goes to a public high school because she just really likes the social life. But she's also on the dean's list. In my homeschooling journey, I also did a bunch of research and wrote a book about famous homeschoolers and how they became successful, which is what I want to share with you here today. First, though, if you don't mind, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you. What brings you here? There's a little poll button over here below my name as the moderator. If you could just choose the letter that best represents you, just A through D there, and if you can click on one of those letters, I'll publish the poll results on this page so we can all see. I'm just really curious to see who my audience is here, who I'm talking to. Let's see, and I'm going to publish these results on the whiteboard so you can all see them. Let me move this down. Oops, wait. Okay, so far we don't have anybody currently homeschooling. Oh, wait a sec, it's not showing up. I do see there's a bunch of A's over here, but it's not showing up in the poll results. Huh. Well, I don't know. Actually, so it looks like we have a lot of people currently homeschooling. Okay, well, that's great.
Hey,
Hi, Steve.
You have to click on the poll response icon, which is at the top of the participant window. It's the 4th icon over. People have been putting their responses in the chat, but if they click on the poll response icon,
Okay.
Oh, so those who are on tablets may not have that option, but if you're on a desktop, yeah, you're going to get a better response now. It's up to 4 homeschoolers.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, so it looks like it's not, it's not refreshing on this, but it looks like, so there's 5 that answered A, 1 that answered C, 2 that answered D. Ooh, there it goes. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's see, I'm going to clear these results here. Okay. Well, I think this presentation will be useful for all of you because learning is universal. That's why we're all here. And it's a topic near and dear to our hearts. But I think that too many homeschooling parents and other educators can get mired in the details of what to teach, which curriculum to use, worrying about how their kids are performing or whether they'll get into college. Those things are important topics, but with this presentation, I want to step back a bit and look at the big picture. What is it we are trying to accomplish? What does it even mean to be successful? And how do we help our kids become successful? Think about that for a few moments because I'll come back a little bit later and ask you about that. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I will give you an overview of the research I did on the childhoods of famously successful people and share with you some of the elements they had in common. Of course, this is a ridiculously ambitious list of topics, and we could spend a lifetime looking at any one of them, but I hope to at least give you an idea of what is possible. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for questions, so if you think of anything during the presentation, just jot it down in the chat box, and I'll try to answer those at the end. When I started homeschooling my 3 kids back in 1997, homeschooling was still a fairly new concept then, at least in our modern world. Of course, in the whole stretch of human history, it's really public schooling that is a new concept. In the old days, kids who weren't working were taught at home by family members or tutors, or in some cases, they went to private schools. I was always curious about how people became successful before the days of standardized schooling. Being one of those people who likes to research everything, I had read every book I could find on homeschooling, and I tried a bunch of different methods on my own poor kids. But I found it very frustrating that there were no clear answers on which way was best. The thing I did notice, though, is that most of the books use test scores or getting into college or finding a job as evidence of success. And that got me thinking. What are we aiming for? If we are trying to decide the best way to teach our children, it seems important to anticipate what the end result will be, right? What would be your definition of success? Anyone? If you don't mind, I'm kind of curious if you could just jot it down in the chat. Oh, thanks, Steve. What would be your idea of a successful homeschool or a successful education? Happy, well-rounded citizen? Yeah, that's a good one. A joyful life, learning all the time. To be satisfied with where you are in life, able to survive, love of learning, ability to overcome life's challenges, happy to learn, adult who knows their place in society. Oh, well, yeah, these are all really good. Able to construct a life of joy and giving. Ooh, that's beautiful. All right, well, those are good. Thank you. So for me, after thinking about it, we'll all have different measures. For me, I decided that my definition of success is bringing forth the best that is in each of us. That one unique vision of truth that is itching to be expressed. Whether you're an accountant or an artist, the successful person will manifest his or her full creative energies. So with that definition in mind, I wanted to know how I could help my kids be successful. Back to this list again, I decided to research famous homeschoolers, people who had already lived full creative lives, doing the thing that they do best. I wanted to know how they were raised, what their parents were like, how they learned, and how they came to be successful. You'll see from the list that I tried to pick a variety of personality types and careers, but even with all of their differences, I found a surprising number of similarities. So here's what I learned. I took all the elements I found in common and grouped them like this. It is really passion and determination that carries an individual to the top, but both rest on the atmosphere of the home and community where a child is raised. The atmosphere doesn't have to be perfect. Not at all. That's not the idea. But I'll get to that later. We're going to cover each one of these in turn. All of the people I studied developed a passion for at least one thing. Alexander Graham Bell was passionate about sound. Beatrix Potter loved drawing. For George Patton and Douglas MacArthur, it was a sense of heroic patriotism. They all had something. As I was doing my research, I had the opportunity to speak with H.W. Brands, who is a history professor and well-known biographer of influential characters in American history. He knew that I was researching how various famous people were taught, and he suggested, almost tentatively, "Did you notice how they were really self-taught?" I said yes, but I was trying not to jump to any conclusions, but I did notice that. The truth is, for all the people I studied, even for the ones who went to school for some time or were purposely taught at home, the bulk of their real learning was self-initiated. They also had the time to pursue the things they were interested in without adult interference, but very often with some adult support. All of my subjects had help from somebody, a mentor to show them what was possible and lend support. This is a picture my son drew. Yeah, you got it, Lainey. When I asked him to guess what an autodidact is. Those of you who are already homeschooling may have heard of John Holt and may be wondering, isn't self-directed learning the same thing as unschooling? And you would be right. John Holt was absolutely right, I think. The only reason I don't use the term unschooling here is because I think it can be confusing and interpreted in ways that John Holt never intended. Plus, hardly any of the people that I studied were exclusively self-taught or even intentionally given free rein over their education. They just did it. Alexander Graham Bell was taught at home by his mother until he was 10, when he was then enrolled in a private school, which he hated. His father had very strict ideas about a classical education and learning Latin and Greek, but Alexander was only interested in science. He was obsessed with the properties of sound and speech, and he begged to be allowed to go study with his grandfather, a famous elocutionist in London. His father finally let him go when he was 15, and his grandfather started him on a program of reading books and reciting Shakespeare. But he was also allowed to attend lectures around London and study as he pleased, and he loved it. Ansel Adams thought school was a complete waste of time. Finally, one day when he was 12, he just burst out laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. The principal escorted him home for a week of suspension, but by the end of the week, his father had decided to teach him at home. He at first taught him French and algebra and required him to read English classics, but the next year, in 1915, his father bought him a year's pass to the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco. Ansel went every day to the exposition, attending concerts, wandering the art galleries, and visiting the science and machinery exhibits. Later, he became obsessed with piano, reading, camping in Yosemite, and, of course, photography. Beatrix Potter had a governess until her early teens, but after that she pursued her own interests, reading Shakespeare and Dickens, visiting the Royal Academy, and most of all, drawing. She spent whole days filling up her sketchbooks, but she really resented the drawing lessons her parents tried to arrange for her. I'll get back to more specifics later on how self-directed learning works, but for now I want to talk about the other keys to finding one's passion. The people I studied became successful because they did something new. They tackled big problems, they looked at things differently, explored new areas, they were creative. We all recognize the importance of creativity, and there have been tons of studies done on it. You've probably seen them. People like Howard Gardner, John Briggs, Alfie Kohn, Michael Gelb. Lots of researchers have looked at this, and they've come to similar conclusions. Children and adults, all of us, will be more creative when we're not afraid of judgment or correction, when we have time to really think and play and explore the things that are most interesting to us. I'm convinced that every child is born creative, and the best way to encourage creativity is to not squash it in the first place. Andrew Wyeth was the son of another famous artist, N.C. Wyeth, who deliberately kept his children home from school so that they would not be brainwashed and ruined. He created a sort of Renaissance household with all the best books, art, music, and activities for his children. Ironically, though, he was very controlling, telling his children what to do, what to eat, what to read, etc., and this annoyed the whole family, as you might imagine. But fortunately, by the time Andrew was born, the father seemed to have lost the energy or the urge to control everything, and so Andrew was free to just wander over the hills looking at things, as he described it. It's great if a youth has a chance to discover their passion, but it really helps to have someone show them the way, someone who's already been there. This is especially important for disadvantaged kids who may not believe they are capable of escaping their circumstances. This was the case for Bernard Carrick, who became New York City Police Commissioner, despite a troubled family life and dropping out of school. He remembers being strongly influenced by watching police shows and the Green Hornet. He was friendly with the cops he met and liked to watch them work. He admired the way cops actually did something to solve problems when it seemed that no one else did. Watching them, he could see himself making a difference, protecting people and confronting justice. Mentors and other role models, whether TV characters or real people, are very important for inspiring young people towards success. We've looked at the various things that contribute to passion: self-directed learning, creativity, mentors. Now we'll look at what leads to determination. How does one youth become responsible and hardworking while another one grows lazy and indifferent? First of all, it really helps to have at least one positive role model, someone who consistently demonstrates a positive attitude and a strong work ethic. It's really hard for a kid to learn these things if they don't even know what it looks like. It also helps to be truly responsible for something, to make choices and suffer the consequences, good or bad, without a parent swooping in to save them. It's also very hard for a child to develop a positive attitude without the unconditional love of at least one person. Whether it's the mother, father, grandparent, or some other adult figure, hopefully more than one, children need to know that they are lovable before they can love themselves and gain the confidence to face the world. I saw examples of this with all the people I researched. In fact, most of them had very strong, devoted mothers. Some people, like General Douglas MacArthur, Frank Lloyd Wright, and FDR, had even smothering mothers who interfered with their sons' lives even as adults. And that's not what I'm recommending, but it is surprisingly common. Thomas Edison had good, hard-working parents who loved him. His mother pulled him out of school when the teachers didn't believe young Thomas had any potential. She taught him at home till he was around 12, at which time he continued his own education while working as a newspaper boy on a train and starting his own small business ventures. He was very independent, curious, and ambitious. He worked hard to learn new skills, earn money, and work on his inventions with no apparent direction or oversight from his parents. I have lots of stories like this of kids who were given the freedom and responsibility to essentially fend for themselves at a relatively young age. In today's world, we would never expect our kids to go to work at age 12, but we have forgotten just how capable kids can be. Adulthood and all the responsibility that goes with it seems to get pushed farther and farther back as kids become more sheltered. A cheerleading coach once told me that she had to forbid mothers from bringing missing items to practice. If a girl forgot her mandatory water bottle, it was common for the girl to simply call her mother on the cell phone, and mom would drive back to bring her one. The only consequence for the girl's mistake was to have mom fix it. So once the coach outlawed fetch and retrieve habits, the girls were forced to sit on the sidelines throughout practice. And they remembered to bring their water bottles next time. Most of the people I researched went through some very tough times. Even the kids from privileged homes experienced family troubles, illness, bullying, and other challenges. John Muir had an especially rough childhood. First with grammar school in Scotland, where lessons were enforced by whipping, and fighting the schoolyard was expected, an everyday occurrence. But then when his family immigrated to the United States, John's strict Calvinist father worked him relentlessly on their new homestead. Every moment of the day he was chopping, plowing, planting, building, and following his father's orders. He trained himself to get up at 1 a.m. every night just so he might have some time for himself to study and build things in his cellar workshop. His growth was even stunted from lack of food and sleep. This guy was tough. When he was finally able to leave home and go in search of wilderness, he didn't need much to stay comfortable, and he was pretty much capable of anything. Now, I'm not implying that we should torture our kids or work them into the ground, but we shouldn't make their lives overly easy either. Parents and other adults can mentor and support kids without becoming their servants. If a child is physically able to do something for himself, well, then he should. And if there's any way to give a child real meaningful work, not busy work, that contributes to the family or community, that's even better. Volunteer work, chores, small businesses, building projects, those are all good ways for kids to develop the habit of hard work with a tangible sense of accomplishment that they will remember in the years ahead. Okay, that gives you the general idea about how to develop determination. Now I want to move on to the importance of atmosphere in the home and community. Atmosphere is like the dirt that a plant digs its roots into, full of rich nutrients and support. Now, you might think that I'm about to recommend a carefully prepared, child-centered home, complete with enriching toys and learning materials, but that's not the idea. Children learn about the world by living in it and by copying the people around them. If parents or other family members are pursuing their own interests and learning new things, then the children will see learning as a completely normal, fun part of life, not something that is inflicted upon them. The home should reflect the interests and occupations of the whole family, and kids should be able to participate. They need to spend time with adults as well as other children, having conversations, going places, doing interesting things. Children also need a lot more exercise than you may think, and they'll feel much better if they're able to wear themselves out. To explain what I mean by atmosphere, I'll give the examples of two people who grew up in very different circumstances. Pearl Buck was raised in China by her American missionary parents. She had a very stable, supportive home with parents who really respected the Chinese culture. They encouraged Pearl to befriend the neighbors, and she enjoyed listening to all the stories of the farmers, shopkeepers, and old wives in the local countryside. She brought food to those in need and became very sensitive to the growing political unrest and troubles of her adopted community. All of these things had a profound impact on Pearl and found a way into her future novels. Louis Armstrong, on the other hand, was born into one of the poorest, roughest, most disreputable neighborhoods of New Orleans in 1901. His father left his mother before he was even born, and she was only 15. So he had to spend a lot of time with his grandmother while his mother looked for work. It was a hard life, but Louis loved people and music. Mardi Gras parades, funeral marches, outdoor picnics, street corners, bars, brass bands were everywhere, and he loved it. And all that time on the street allowed him to meet people and be part of that energy. Louis Armstrong may not have ever become the musician he was without that atmosphere, just as Pearl Buck may not have been able to write those powerful stories set in China if she hadn't grown up there. One thing I want to emphasize about the people I studied is how much time they spent outside. Author Margaret Atwood grew up in the Canadian backwoods. General George Patton climbed trees and rode horses. Andrew Wyeth played Robin Hood with his friends in the forest. Walt Whitman spent hours daydreaming under an apple tree. This is not even counting the children who grew up on farms, working outside and caring for animals. Teddy Roosevelt was a huge believer in physical activity and time spent outside. He believed anyone could do it because he himself had made the transformation. When he was young, he was very small and frail, and he suffered from frequent asthma attacks. Other boys picked on him, and he hated that he couldn't be like the brave soldiers and Western heroes he read about. So when he was 14, he decided to do something about it and started his own workout plan. As he grew stronger, he was able to go on extended backpacking and hunting trips, and he became quite the naturalist. He was never able to excel at any of his sports, but he developed an amazing vitality that influenced the rest of his life. I hope that gives you a general idea of what I mean by atmosphere. A stimulating, authentic environment, combined with a healthy dose of freedom and responsibility, will lead to real accomplishments that none of us can predict. But you may be thinking that all of those examples I gave were for a different time, under different circumstances. How would this work in our modern world, especially the part about self-directed learning? How would kids get into college or get a job? What would you tell your local school officials? We have some time left before questions, so I will do my best to explain how to make this work. First, let me highlight one of the big differences between conventional teaching and self-directed or interest-driven learning. Educational theorists long ago thought it might be a good idea to concentrate on the processes or tools of learning first, such as good old reading, writing, and arithmetic, then move on to progressively higher order concepts and thinking. That's not a bad idea, and it certainly does work. In fact, that's probably the system that most of us grew up with. The problem is it doesn't work as well as it ought to. If every child learned everything that school officials and curriculum writers attempted to teach, we'd all be amazingly well informed. But realistically, most kids find this boring, and they need external rewards like grades to learn enough to pass the test and get on with life. Who knows what they'll remember and what they'll promptly forget? We humans are stubborn creatures. That's why I suggest a system that works with human nature instead of against it. It leverages the power of curiosity. The learning is based around topics of interest, and then the processes or tools of learning are picked up along the way. Math, reading, writing, thinking, and creating are all tools that we use or see every day in different ways without necessarily being aware of it. Let's say your child is really interested in dinosaurs. That one interest could lead to any number of related bits of inquiry, such as geology, timelines, metric measurements, geography, comparative weight and length, not to mention practice with reading, which also helps them internalize proper spelling and grammar. And if you get a chance to talk to somebody about it, that's even better, because then they get a chance to put their thoughts in order and choose words, which are all precursors to good writing. The thing is, your kids may not even know they are learning all of these things, and you may not realize it either until you start paying attention and keeping notes. So the way to translate interest-driven learning into a record that school officials would understand is to take notes about those things that your child is learning and then categorize them in a way that makes sense to school officials. This is relatively easy for younger kids because the sorts of skills taught in elementary school are easy to come across in everyday life. Things like cooking, crafts, building projects, games, reading, trips to interesting places, even playing outside. Just do what you can to help your kids find the resources they need. Take them places, read to them, listen to them, play with them. It's okay to suggest new things you think your kids will like, but if they don't like it, just let it go. And while you're doing all of these things, take notes. That way, if you have to present a portfolio to school officials at the end of the year, you'll be prepared. Plus, it's just really nice to record all those memories of how you spend your days. Yes, there will be gaps. There will always be gaps, no matter what form of education you choose. But the points of connection will be rock solid. We can't possibly teach kids everything there is to know. It would take several lifetimes just to scratch the surface of what there is to know. So don't worry. Okay, so what about older kids? When your kids are old enough to start thinking more abstractly, and this will happen at different ages for different kids, they will be able to become more systematic in their learning. They will be old enough to start planning ahead, especially if they want to go to college. Most colleges, of course, expect incoming freshmen to have completed certain courses and have reasonable scores on standardized tests. This is when you switch into the role of academic advisor. Help your students look at college websites to determine what is required. Check out books on SAT preparation to see which topics are covered. Then help them make a learning plan. Algebra 2 or essay writing may not be high on their list of things to learn, but if it's necessary to fulfill their goals, then they're mature enough to learn it anyway. The learning plan can still be largely interest-driven, though. For example, if your daughter is interested in fashion design, there's no reason why her world history course couldn't revolve around fashion and costume through the ages. She would probably learn way more than she would from the typical textbook. Her writing of research papers could also relate to fashion. She might come up with some amazing project ideas. You just never know. You also have the flexibility to choose the best books or curriculum for your student's particular learning style, which can make a big difference. So if your student wants to go to college and colleges require a course she really doesn't like, she will still be mature enough to know that it must be done. But it's her decision, not yours. Do your best to support her, find appropriate resources, and if necessary, find a teacher. Self-directed learning might mean going to school if that is your child's choice. They are in charge of their education in whatever form it takes. So here's what you do. As you can see, self-directed education doesn't mean hands-off parenting. It's actually a lot of work. In some ways, it's harder than following a prescribed curriculum because you have to make it up as you go. But the results are well worth it. Nobody becomes a legend simply for high test scores or graduation from a prestigious college. Measurement by other people's standards only means more of the same. The idea is to bring forth the best that is in each of us, which may be something never done before and requires a whole new way to get there. Trust the process and see what happens. That's all I can squeeze into this presentation, but if you would like to learn more details about how self-directed learning works, forming habits, dealing with screen time, willpower, and other issues, please check out my book, Legendary Learning, which is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble online. You can learn more also about my blog, which is, there's the link on that page. And also, if you're a Mac user and want to try keeping your homeschool records on your computer, you might want to check out my software, OLLY. I put the website on the screen there. So that's it. Now let's look at what questions you might have. Let's see, I think I'm going to scroll up to the top of the chat window. Okay, those are all right, I'm looking at the definitions of success. Yeah, Suki, you say homeschoolers can be just as guilty of coddling their kids as school parents. That's true. I think any parent can be guilty of that. It's a hard thing not to do because you don't want to see your kids get hurt or make bad decisions. It's very hard to be quiet when they're about to do something you don't agree with. Okay. Oh, Theodore Roosevelt. So you're not sure you agree with that quote, Tara, about living the life of ease? I think he means not just a life of physical exertion, but exertion in general, of working hard to do something and complete something. A lot of people never stick with it that long. Let's see. Minecraft, yeah. My kids love Minecraft. And you know, at first I thought they were wasting a lot of time until I actually looked to see what they were doing. I couldn't believe it. Minecraft is really difficult, and they had to do so much planning, and they wanted to, I know my boys wanted to do a reproduction of some old buildings from ancient history, and they had to do a lot of research into what the architecture and the geography, and I couldn't believe they did all this just for Minecraft. They spent days and days and days working on this. So Suki, you disagree with Bloom's taxonomy? My kids learn best by assigning themselves a task that they actually don't have the skills to complete. Then they attain the skills and knowledge in order to complete the task. Yeah, that's right. I really think that happens. It seems impossible. Like, how could that happen? How could you learn to do something without somebody showing you first? But just somehow they do. And I think it's because they pick up a lot more than you expect. Just watching other people and researching, investigating, trying things, they figure out a lot. And then that's what I mean by the points of connection being rock solid. Oh, zombies. I know quite a few kids who are obsessed with zombies. Oh yeah, and yeah, learning Java. Exactly. One of my sons is a real computer geek, and he taught himself program. He started learning to program when he was 12, and he's taught himself I don't know how many languages since then. Oh, yeah. So I did get to the part about older kids. Yeah, some people have used the example about learning the tools first. It's sort of the equivalent of teaching your child to walk by breaking it up into steps, right? You know, like first we'll learn about putting our shoes on, and then we'll learn about standing. And really, kids don't even need to be taught that. They follow that progression naturally. Let's see. Okay, so the problem with SAT tests. Yeah, that's a good point. The SAT subject test, if they were to go back and take the world history subject test, they may not know about some of the things that are required on there. But I guess if you wanted to take the subject test, you could also get the study guide first and then make sure you've covered everything before taking the test. Yeah, I know standardized tests are one of my big pet peeves because I don't think it's a very accurate measure of what kids actually are capable of or what they know. So it is unfortunate, but I can also see from the school's point of view, you know, how will they know if a student's going to be able to handle the workload? So it's going to be an ongoing battle, I think. Let's see, Desi and so Tara, you asked about Desi and Ryan's work on self-determination. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. No, I'm not familiar with that. I've never heard of them. Maybe you could tell me if they have a certain book. Yeah, a lot of kids don't plan to go straight to university, and I really don't. I think, you know, there's this big expectation that everybody should try to go to university, and I don't necessarily think that's the best route, especially nowadays with college being so expensive. So there are certain professions, of course, where you absolutely have to go to college, but there's a lot of things, especially entrepreneurship, where you don't have to go to college unless you want to, or maybe just take certain classes to fill the gaps of what you need to know. Like for me, I would really like to take a class on accounting. I need to learn that. Well, it's okay if, you know, my son is a computer geek about the role models not being into nature. I completely understand that. My son, his role models are all other computer people, but he still gets outside. So your 9-year-old daughter doesn't enjoy doing schoolwork, but she is an avid reader and animal lover. So she researches topics like feline behaviors and fish breeding. That's wonderful. Should you throw out the textbooks? Well, you can keep the textbooks there as a reference, but no, my recommendation is to get books written by people who love felines and fish. Those are, you know, you might have heard of the term living books. And living books are the best thing ever. Those are books that are well written, and they're written by authors with a passion for their topic. And those are the best ones to read, particularly for nature-based topics. Well, really, any topic. I think if your daughter's interested in fish breeding, there's someone else who's passionate about it, and those are the books that she would get the most out of. And then if she does her own projects, there's going to be all kinds of things she learns on the periphery that maybe she didn't know that she wanted to know, but she'll discover later. Now, the problem with textbooks is that it breaks everything into chunks. I mean, and they are really, can be nice resources, or if you're trying to find something in particular or figure out topics that you need to cover. But you know, unless you're doing this to fulfill some requirement, I think it's much better to use living books. My homeschool planning software, yeah, it's for Mac-based users, Mac and iPad right now. We've almost got the iPad ready. And this is actually a mother-son collaboration. My son, the computer geek, is the one that wrote it all. And he's been working on it for years. He's currently a computer science major at the University of Washington. So this has been a long process. I helped design it based on what I would want to see, what makes the most sense for me. So it's tough when you switch between programs because every program uses its own data model. But you can certainly get on the website and download a trial to see if it works for you. And give it a try. It's not an online basis one that you actually download. Let's see, many people have asked if cmasas.org can prep kids for university. Gosh, I've never heard of that. I'm not sure what that is. I'm amazed though at how many wonderful resources are online. I think more and more kids in schools are going to be doing self-directed learning as they bring in these outside online resources. It's just astonishing what you can do. It's very self-paced. I was attempting to do a blog post where I would look at all the available resources and make a grid or something to help homeschoolers choose something that would work best for them. But once I dug into it, I found it was like it was a bottomless pit. I couldn't get to the bottom of it. So I gave up trying. Maybe I'll pick it up again later, but there's just a lot out there. And this conference, I learned more just in this conference. Oh yeah, vocational tech, that's awesome. I really like schools that are very specific to something that the child wants to learn. There's a lot of great opportunities or volunteer options, traveling abroad. Okay, Desi and Ryan have written a lot about self-determination theory in relation to education. Huh, okay, I will have to look into that. Yeah, living videos on YouTube, I would agree. It's just another form of presenting an idea. So there's so many people on YouTube that have channels and they're passionate about something. I like to look at the ones on urban farming, but everybody has something, and it's a great way to find out how to do things. Personalized online program. Ah, self-paced. Interesting. Okay, thanks for that. The CMASAS. I'll have to check into that. Open culture. Oh, okay, that's another one. See, there's so many, and they keep popping up every day. Okay. Academic Earth. Oh, that sounds like another good one. Wow. Yeah, I really think there's never ever been a better time to do a self-directed education. I mean, you look at these guys from 100 years ago, and they really had to struggle to get the books that they needed. Thomas Edison, he had to get on a train and go all the way to Detroit just to use a library. And a lot of the libraries weren't even free in those days. So we are very blessed and fortunate in our modern world to get whatever kind of information we need. Yeah, I feel paralyzed too. And if you're homeschooling, you probably have seen the giant lists of resources for sale and curriculum products, and it's so hard to choose, right? Which is the great thing about reading reviews, and if you can get your hands on an actual live copy, that helps too. But it is, a lot of choices. It can be paralyzing, but it's also a lot of fun. Okay, well, let's see, does anyone have any more questions? Just put them up in the chat box there. Okay, oh wait, whoops. So Tara's written a paper about that. Self-determination theory, okay. Based on the research of home-educated children in the UK. All right. Well, thank you. Helping teens become more focused on their goals. That's always good. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. All right, this has been really fun. Yeah, and of course, you can go back later and check out the recording. Let's see, let me move on to the next slide here, I think. Yeah, so thank you for participating. It was good to be here. I'm going to turn off the recording now. Oh, actually, I can't turn it off until everyone's left. I'm sorry.
I think, Jamie, when you notice most people have left or have actually, you know, answered their questions and everything, you can turn it off, and that will close everybody out pretty much.
Oh, well, okay. Let's see. All right. Well, it looks like everyone's kind of winding down now. Okay, so I will try turning it off and see if this works. Stop